Well. What's the well about? Everybody's worried about wells. Are they going to go dry? What about the potability? Can you drink the water? We're going to take a deep dive, no pun intended, actually it was intended, into wells in the greater Prescott area. So join me right here on MovEnomics and let's talk about water and wells. Hello and welcome to MovEnomics. I'm Peter Fife with Coldwell Banker Northland in beautiful Prescott, Arizona, where Prescott is everybody's hometown, and we'd love to make it your hometown too. Now, let's talk about water. Everybody's worried about water, especially all you Californians. You come here and you think just because you don't have any water there, we don't have water here. We have water. We have the second largest aquifer in Arizona with 2 trillion gallons and can support a population of over 500,000 people with ease. And remember, the greater Prescott area only currently has about 120,000 people. We got a long way to go. It won't happen in my time. It won't happen in your grandkids' lifetime. You've got water, so chill out and don't try to come here with all your politics and destroy our water. We're okay. Next, let's talk about the quality of the water and wells. So your municipalities, we've got plenty of water. In fact, I want to make this one point to you so you understand. We use less water today than we did in 1984 when we had 1/3 the population. Why? Because you simply have to ask yourself the question, what uses more water? People or farms? Farms use way more water than people do. And we don't have any more big agricultural farms like we did in the 80s. So we are using less water today than we did then. We are at a complete net zero, meaning that we are recharging our aquifer at the same amount we're taking it out. So we're okay. Okay. Now let's talk about well waters on acreage. This is pretty important, and there's quite a bit to know. All areas are not created equal when it comes to wells. Wells run anywhere from, you can be as shallow as maybe 100 feet, but that's rare. Generally, you're between 500 to 700 feet for the majority of our wells. 80% of our wells are going to be between that 500 and 700 foot range. Some are as deep as 1,000. Some are that 350 range, okay? And it depends on the area. When it comes to water quality, when it comes to production, let's talk a little bit about production for just a minute. Now, most all of the properties are located in what's called an active management area, an AMA. What that means is you can't just go pop down a well that's 50 gallons a minute and start watering your acreage like you're going to have a farm. They gauge it, meaning that you can't have a well that produces over 35 gallons a minute. So even though you have a 50 gallon a minute well or whatever it is, they'll generally always on the paperwork say 35 gallons a minute because of the AMA, number one. Number two, they will gauge your pump, meaning in the city, you get 10 gallons a minute on the average. When you turn on your faucets, your hoses and everything, that's kind of an average, okay? The well pumps with a 1-inch pipe are usually designed to throw down about 14 to 15 gallons a minute, max. So even if you have a 100 gallon a minute well, you'll get 14 to 15 gallons a minute because the size of the pipe and the size of your well. So don't freak out when you come here and go, my well's only 14 gallons a minute. That's pretty good. No problem at all. Okay. Now, you're going to want to test the water when you get a well, and you're going to want to have a well inspection. Okay. Any agent that does not tell you to do a well inspection has no clue what they're doing. Okay. You should always do a well inspection. Number one, you want to see what the flow is, that it can hold that rate for at least 2 hours of time. And you want to do a potability test that says, hey, there's no E. coli or bacteria in the water. There's generally not. The water here, I'm on a well. I've been on a well for 17 years since I've been here. And frankly, I love my well water. I drink it out of the tap every day. You don't have to worry about doing any filtration. And it's better than your Arrowhead water or any of your bottled water. It just tastes awesome. It's got the minerals you need, and it's just refreshing. It's like you could bottle this stuff. It's so good because here's what you need to understand about wells. Water, when you go to a municipality, the way they treat that water is you can take dirty water, run it through 15 feet of sand, and generally, not always, because I'm not a water engineer, it will come out clean on the other side. So like if you're in the mountains, you see a water dip down and you walk 20 feet away and it pops back up out of the ground, it's going to be clean because it's been filtered. We're talking about 300 to 500 feet worth of dirt to filter your water. Are you kidding me? That's 10 times better than any municipal water system, okay? So is it perfect? No, no water's perfect. So here we don't really have, there is some areas that have higher nitrates, nitrites, but that's pretty minimal. There's some areas in Dewey. When it comes to arsenic in the water, we need to talk about just a little bit so that you can understand where we come from on this. In Canada right now, the acceptable level of arsenic in water is considered 50 parts per billion. America used to always be 50 parts per billion, up until the last 2 weeks of Bill Clinton's career, in which he unilaterally did an edict and signed it down to 10 parts per billion. Well, that was problematic to the Western United States because Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Idaho, and parts of California were running at about 25 parts per billion just because it's a naturally occurring substance in granite. And we have a lot of granite mountains and granite in our soil, okay? So Bush got in office and he said, okay, we'll give you 8 years to comply, which tells you how worried they were about it, okay? So anything under 25 parts per billion, there's very few studies out there that say there's any kind of negative effect. You know, the government tends to overkill when it comes to stuff. And so they'll take an acceptable level and half it or go below that so that nobody has a problem, right? But it does say, there has been some studies that say over 25 parts per billion, a child can have some stomach issues. So usually if it's under 25, nobody cares. You can reduce arsenic if it's above 25 but under 50. A reverse osmosis system can take that out. It's just when you drink it. You can take a shower in arsenic water. It's not a problem. It's not going to affect you unless it's really high. In all of my career, in the hundreds of well tests that I've had done, here is kind of a summary of what the test will look like. Maybe 15 or 20 have been under 10 parts per billion. Very rare. Maybe 15 or 20 have been above 50 parts per billion. The vast majority run in that 10 to 15 range, sometimes as high as 20, but the vast majority of wells are running in that acceptable level, just like you drink your entire life if you've lived in the West, okay? So it's not something to freak out about and go, I'm gonna die, there's arsenic in the water. If you're a nervous Nilly and you really wanna be worried about it, get an arsenic filter for about $2,500 to $3,000 and throw it in your house and you won't have a problem at all, okay? But the well water here is very, very good. It doesn't have sulfurs in it. I've never heard of an area with sulfurs in it. It is a little bit hard, but nobody gets water softeners here. And I don't know why, but our water is fairly hard. So that's kind of an overview of waters. Now, good well areas and not so good well areas. That could be an hour-long conversation. And you'd really need to know our area or you're going to have no clue what I'm talking about. So a good rule of thumb to know a good well area, just as an overview, as an old-time pro who's been doing this a long time, when I go into an area with wells, the first thing I look for is storage tanks or trees. If I see a lot of trees and a lot of foliage and no storage tanks, it's generally going to be a really good well-producing area. If I'm seeing no trees, very little vegetation, and every other house has a 2,500-gallon storage tank, it's probably going to be a weaker producing well area. What you're looking for in a well. Now, here's the reality. If you have a 1 gallon a minute well and you have a storage tank, you'll probably be just fine. Meaning That's 2,000 gallons of water a day. You in the city, if you look at your water bill, you're only knocking out 10 to 15,000 gallons worth of water a month. So that's double what you're generally using with just 1 gallon a minute. So are you really worried about having enough water with 1 gallon a minute as long as you have a storage tank? No, you're really not. The concern would be, could it go dry? That's a longer discussion. What's the static water level? Where's your pump set at? What was it before? How much has it dropped? How deep is the well? These are things that you can discuss with a professional like me or a well expert. 5 gallons a minute is considered a pretty good well. 3 to 5, you're going to have more than enough water. You don't even need a storage tank with that, because usually your well pump will sit 100 to 150 feet below what's called the static water level, which means you have anywhere between 800 and 1,000 gallons of water in the hole itself, okay? So you don't usually see storage tanks when it's 3 to 5 gallons a minute. 10 gallons a minute and above is the gold standard. If you have 10 gallons a minute or more, buy the house. Don't worry about your well going dry. I can't guarantee anything, of course, because you might be sitting on the fringe, because the valley kind of sits, if you go from mountain to mountain, as you get closer to the mountains, the wells are hit or miss. I'll give you an example. I had a house in a subdivision called Prescott Prairie, and it was a developer of mine. He was doing a spec house, which means a speculative build, if you don't know what that means. He popped a well on one corner of the lot, and he got 1 gallon a minute, and he was at 550 feet. He's like, oh, I want a better well. Throw it on the other corner of the lot, 15 gallons a minute, less than 150 feet away, because he's up against that mountain. When you're getting closer to those mountains, it seems like you're kind of like a lake. You're on the shore. You have to hit a spot or hit a vein running into it, okay? So I don't want to bore you about wells, but there's a whole lot to know. Here's what you need to remember. If you want to buy a house on acreage, you're pretty much going to have a well 95% of the time, a septic 95% of the time, and you're going to have propane. And you really need an expert to guide you through these things. Don't wing it. Talk to an expert. So give me a call at 928-636-7000 or email me at peter@listingprescott.com, and make sure you do the social media fun stuff. You know, follow me on X, like me on Facebook, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, because you want to stay informed about the greater Prescott area. Because if you're considering moving here, MovEnomics is the place to be. Thanks for joining me today on MovEnomics.
Everyone knows the power of social media and the impact a strong online presence has in this day and age. But most real estate agents simply do not have the time to manage all the advertising and marketing details, and that's where the Power Is Now Media steps in. We are the answer you have been looking for. Let us help put your brand on the map. We will create customized graphics for weekly full-page ads, social media content, video, and podcast content for you. Sound complicated and expensive? It is affordable and easy. We have the best experts on the job. Go to thepowerisnow.com and find us under the VIP Agent tab to learn more. This is the future of real estate. Join today. thepowerisnow.com.